Hello my soccer universe. I really enjoyed this past weekend in terms of watching all these different leagues because it was also neatly packed together most of the time because all the games happened at the same time. Started out in Germany with the finale for the final Champions League spots, also a teeny bit relegation there, although that was never really exciting. Also who will end up in the European spots. That was the first package. Then, of course, I went over to Austria. But once that had finished, there was, of course, a title decider in Portugal, which, let's face it, was not as exciting, but it was a grand celebration afterwards. Followed then by the last match day in France, where we had a very late twist and turn. Of course, I'm wearing Crystal Palace, which was the only game I could not watch. The FA Cup final is not broadcast in Austria this year, which happened right between the ending of the Austrian League and the beginning of the Portuguese League. But Crystal Palace, Oliver Glasner, an Austrian, an Upper Austrian, a former last coach, doing great things, not only in Frankfurt, but now also in England. So that was also quite exciting. And it continued then on Sunday, all being so neatly tied together. The final match day in the Netherlands. No, there was no final twist. Then we had the match day in Spain, and then very late on there was also quite some drama in Italy, but that will be in a video that I'm gonna release tomorrow because I need to digest everything that happened in there as well. And yeah, Premier League was sprinkled a little bit on Friday, a little bit on Sunday, and it's still not done, but I decided, okay, let's cut it here. This is what we had as of Monday afternoon. So please join me on a trip throughout Europe with 3 titles being handed out. One in England, one in the Netherlands, one in Portugal, but also quite some other interesting action along the way. Let's be honest, the final round in Germany didn't give us the surprises and upsets and swings that we have seen in previous seasons. However, it was still an enjoyable watch, and there were 3 battlegrounds in the relegation fight, in the fight for Europe, and of course for the final 2 Champions League spots. Let's start at the bottom. That was the least exciting one because Werder Bremen took care of Heidenheim, who desperately needed a win to avoid landing in the relegation spot. However, Romano Schmidt with a penalty in the 14th minute already set Bremen on to a win. Starke added in the 33rd minute and there was no comeback. Duksch added a 3rd one and then Kerber very late on. Heidenheim will have to fight for the survival in the relegation. And so it didn't matter much for Hoffenheim to lose 4-0 at home to Bayern in Thomas Müller's last game for the Bavarians. Olise, Kimmich, Gnabry and Kane scoring the 4 goals. And St. Pauli also could afford a rather damning 2-0 home loss to the last place team Bochum, where Boadu got a brace. On to the fight for the European spots, and thanks to Stuttgart being in the cup final, this was more or less between Mainz and Leipzig, who will make it into the conference. And Mainz put Leverkusen under enormous pressure, however had no less than 3 goals disallowed until finally in the 35th minute the goal by Nabel counted. But Mainz really dominating the first half, and if this would have been 2-3-0 at the half, it would have been very much deserved. However, it comes as it so often comes. Patrick Schick turns it around with a penalty in the 49th minute and then also scoring himself in the 54th minute. The game turned on its head. Burkhardt with a penalty gets then the equalizer for Mainz, who then had a 4th goal disallowed in the 93rd minute thanks to a foul in the build-up. So really not a great afternoon for Mainz as they left themselves open, losing points to Leipzig, leapfrogging them. However, Leipzig, despite having twice the lead, did not get the job done. Xavi Simons opens the score in the 8th minute, however Undorf in the 23rd equalizes for Stuttgart. Riedle Baku in the 44th, again the Leipzig lead, and you really thought that they might see this out. However, Woltemar in the 57th gets an equalizer and Demirovic gets the game done in a game that meant almost nothing for Stuttgart, who are still looking very much at their cup final in a week's time. In the battle for the final Champions League spot, Dortmund had it in their own hands. They knew that if they have a decisive win over already relegated Holstein Kiel, they will get the job done. And they got the job done. And it turned early in the favor of Dortmund. In the 3rd minute, Girassi already converts a penalty. Johansson then got sent off in the 9th minute. So for almost an entire match, Dortmund had to play against a team with 10 men. And Kiel, to their credit, actually worked quite well in the first half. Dortmund didn't create much. However, right after the half, Julian Brandt finds Marcel Sabitzer. It's 2-0 Dortmund, and then it was already tangible that Dortmund will snatch that fourth spot against all the odds when you see where they have been not too long ago. Mecha then seals it in the 73rd minute. At that point, it didn't even matter how the result between Freiburg and Frankfurt will end up. Dortmund are in the Champions League again. And with that, Freiburg against Frankfurt became a final for the final Champions League spot. Curious enough, whoever will win that one will end up in third place ahead of Dortmund. And Rizzo Doan gave Freiburg the lead in the 27th minute, that Ansgar Knauff then in stoppage time equalizes. So all scores level, which would have meant that Frankfurt will qualify already. So Freiburg needed to come out, but very quickly Frankfurt get the job done. Christensen and Skiri in the 61st and 63rd minute give Frankfurt a decisive advantage, who in the end deservedly won at Freiburg. So it is Bayern, Leverkusen, Frankfurt and Dortmund in the Champions League, whereas Freiburg will go in the Europa League, where they will be joined by the German Cup winner. Mainz will be in the Conference League next year. Oliver Glasner did it. He becomes the first Austrian manager to win the FA Cup and hands Crystal Palace the first title ever in 120 years of history, beating Manchester City in the final 1-0. That's the outstanding part. The way they did it, though, is, yes, that's how an underdog wins an FA Cup final. Cede all the possession to Manchester City and then hit them on the counter-attack, which they did on the 16th minute. After City already had a pretty good chance to take the lead. It's a kick out that is brought down by Mateta, plays it out to the right side to Munoz, pass in, and Eze one times it into the net. 16th minute, Crystal Palace have the lead. However, then it was Henderson that took the center stage. He had two big saves, none bigger than the penalty save on Omar Mamouche, and then the follow-up by Erling Haaland. However, 10 minutes earlier, he potentially could have been sent off by handling the ball outside of the box. After VAR, this survived, and this was a big talking point after the game. However, he also made a pretty big save. I think it was on Doku, where he just punched the ball out, and he was the star of the show. In the second half, it actually started with Munoz giving Crystal Palace a 2-0 lead. That was the call for an offside. I think it was Sarr who was in the offside position before then, and then it was just holding on to that result, and City really had a hard time breaking down Crystal Palace. And so Palace are your FA Cup champions and play in Europe next season, where City still have to fight for that Champions League berth. As exciting as the league has been all season long, the title decider actually went one way in Sporting's way, and it's mostly down to Benfica not really showing up in Braga. Kinda surprisingly so. I mean, Braga had way more of the first half and took a deserved lead through a 23rd minute Salazar penalty. A clear stomp on the foot was the foul, and it could have been two as well. And it continued like that in the second half, and Benfica really only woke up once Sporting already had the lead. They got an equalizer through Pavlidis, who actually missed a big chance just before that in one action before Di Maria finds him, and he makes it 1-1. And then it really seemed to all break for Braga, with João Moutinho being sent off for a high foot with a second yellow card. However, Benfica cannot find a winner, so it was all advantage Sporting. And Sporting seemingly played rather nervously at home against Vitória, who honestly needed the points as well to finish within the European spots. But it was the beautiful goal by Pedro Gonçalves in the 55th minute that gave Sporting the lead. It was very nice one-touch football. Araujo playing it back to Gonçalves, who by the inside of the post then gives Sporting the lead. And it was clear, if Sporting win, they're going to be champions in any case, although a draw would have been enough. And then Viktor Gyökeres with another rather remarkable goal, a striker's goal. He gets the ball, touches past the goalie, and then just gets the foot on it to make it 2-0. Seals the deal, and it was clear that Sporting are champions, and also that Vitória miss out on Europe. Because Santa Clara get the 2-1 away win at Farense, a Farense team that actually with a point would have avoided relegation, so that was double heartache. But Santa Clara, a promoted team, make it into the Conference League. On the bottom, nothing really changed because all the teams that were on the bottom actually did lose, and so the final thing was who will finish third. Well, it's Porto with an easy 3-0 win over Nacional. Moura already in the first minute opening the score. Nacional actually missed a penalty in the 12th minute, and remember, that was a Nacional team that really kicked Porto out of the title race. Second half, it's a Samu penalty, and a Mora goal that gave Porto the 3-0 win. At that point, Nacional had already been reduced to 10 men. The last match day in France provided us with some twists and turns, some late-minute drama that had impact not only on the relegation but also on the European spots. There was no miracle though for Saint-Etienne, who needed a win and then some results falling their way. However, Toulouse early opened up a 2-0 lead. Yes, they twice made it a little bit tight, but Toulouse ended up being 3-2 winners. And so after the season, Saint-Etienne, a much storied team, is down to Ligue 2. But then there were two duels that had implications for both the final Champions League spot and all the Europa League spots, as well as the relegation. Lille faced Reims and had a 1-0 halftime lead. However, Akiem got the equalizer in the 60th minute, a much needed point for Reims, because at the same time Le Havre were actually losing and it would have meant survival for Reims. However, Akpom with a penalty in the 86th minute put Reims in real trouble, whereas Lille had some slight hope of at least finishing in the Champions League spot, but Europa League was already secured. And so it came down to the match between Strasbourg and Le Havre. The game was 1-1 at the halftime. Then Strasbourg, who were hoping for a Champions League spot, yes, few results would have to fall their way, but this would have been a major achievement for them. And Nanasi in the 53rd minute gave Strasbourg the 2-1 lead. However, Le Havre was really fighting for survival because they knew things might work out for them over in Lille and had a goal disallowed 66th minute, but Casemiro 70th minute got the equalizer, and then both teams were going for it, and it went then all down into the stoppage time where Le Havre were really pushing to get the winner, and the winner they got. It was a foul in the 98th minute that saw a Strasbourg player already sent off, and then Touré steps up and right down the middle gives Le Havre the winner, which secures for them survival, whereas Reims have to go into the relegation, where they play the two games against Metz in between the cup final, where they're facing PSG, which might actually be also the get out of jail card for Strasbourg, because if PSG win that cup final, then Strasbourg will be at least in the Conference League. And it also might mean Europa League for Lyon, who get a 2-0 win over Angers, leapfrogging Strasbourg, and so Europe is secured. However, will it be enough to avoid relegation? Because a whole lot of money needs to be found for Lyon to not get relegated. However, none of these teams get the final Champions League spot, because it is Nice who get an emphatic 6-0 home win over this year's Champions League surprise, Brest, beating them 6-0 and waltzing into the Champions League qualification rounds. And then let's also look at the results of the top three. Monaco end the season with a 4-0 loss at Lens. Wilstill's last game for Lens. No Europa League for them. Yes, 52nd minute red card through Mangas didn't help when they were already 1-0 down. OM finish out the season with a 4-2 home win over Stade Rennais, with Mason Greenwood and Adrien Rabiot scoring a brace each. Greenwood even missed a penalty in there. However, the most notable scene was when Mandanda came on for Rennes. He was, of course, long-time goalkeeper for Marseille and received a hero's welcome on his potentially final match. And champions and Champions League finalists PSG get a 3-1 home win to finish the season against Auxerre, with Kvaratskhelia scoring a brace. Marquinhos also getting on the score sheet. However, they were 1-0 down at the half. After Ajax's full collapse over the past 4 weeks, squandering a 9-point lead and giving PSV the advantage going into the last round, the title decider was not that much of a drama. However, there was a slight little hiccup. Both teams took the lead almost at the same time. Ivan Perisic gave PSV the lead at Sparta Rotterdam, who had actually a slim chance to make it into this Conference League playoff. However, results would have to fall their way, which they never did. And Ajax took the lead through Jordan Henderson against Twente, who were still fighting for the top seed in said Conference League playoffs. So at halftime it was still PSV with a 1-point lead over Ajax, and then the little twist in the tail came in the 52nd minute. Zekiel gets the equalizer for Sparta Rotterdam, and just a little bit later Weghorst actually doubled the lead for Ajax. However, the goal was then called off for an offside, and then right when this was decided, Luc de Jong makes it 2-1 for PSV, and everyone knew that's more or less is. Yes, in Amsterdam everyone was hoping that there will be an equalizer in Rotterdam, while they themselves needed to get it up to 2-0. And there were some chances. I mean, PSV did control the game, didn't want to go all out, and yes, Sparta did try when they got the ball. However, there was not much of suspense, and Malik Tillman in the 84th minute seals the deal, and so the second goal for Wout Weghorst in the 90th minute didn't matter much. PSV fans could celebrate a highly unlikely title, a title that they almost had secured already earlier this year, then completely fell apart, ceded all the advantage to Ajax, who then proceeded to fall apart as well. So a rather weird title race in the Netherlands. We also know now that Faraoli has stepped down as a manager of Ajax. Seemingly there were some disagreements with the leadership in the club, and Ajax are looking actively at Erik ten Hag to come back. And remember, when he stepped down, that's when the Ajax fall actually really came. However, let's see, Ajax are also in a little bit of financial troubles. All credit though has to go to PSV, who were overall the best team in this Eredivisie season, and they get it right at the very end. With Twente's loss, a solitary point by AZ over last place and already relegated Almere was enough to seal the top spot in this Conference League playoff round. Sittard meanwhile do not manage to beat Utrecht, who already had 4th place secured, and so they left themselves open to not making this playoff, and Heerenveen got it done early, a 2-0 lead already after 30 minutes through Petrov and Lukovic against Feyenoord, put them already in the driver's seat, and thanks to Sittard not winning, Heerenveen are in the last spot in the Conference League playoff. Even though round 37 won't be finished until Tuesday evening, let's look at the Premier League results that happened from Friday and Sunday. We had on Friday both Europa League finalists going away from home and both being rather poor against Champions League candidates. Aston Villa beat Spurs 2-0 at home, with the 2 goals coming second half through Konsa and Kamara. And while Maguire may have seemingly given United the lead at Chelsea, the goal was chalked off for offside, and then it's Cucurella who heads it in for a 1-0 winner for Chelsea. The emotional highlight of the round was, of course, Everton saying goodbye to Goodison with a 2-0 home win over Southampton. Hence, I decided to wear Everton. Njaya scoring both goals already in the first half. Much more important was Forest's 2-1 away win at West Ham, a win that keeps them very much in contention for a Champions League spot. Gibbs White and Milenkovic opened up a 2-0 lead. Jared Bowen only pulls one back late on. Fulham just about keep themselves in contention for the 8th spot in the Premier League, which, if Chelsea should win the Conference League, would mean a Conference League berth for that spot. They get a perfect, as I like to call it, 3-2 away win at Brentford. Jimenez gave them the 16th minute, and Mbeumo and Wissa turned around just before the half-time. Mbeumo even missing a penalty in the process in the 28th minute. And then in the second half, Kearney and Harry Wilson turned around for Fulham, and it's important 3 points for them. Meanwhile, Jamie Vardy said goodbye to Leicester by opening a scoring against also relegated Ipswich, scoring I think his 200th goal for Leicester in the process as well. McAteer adds a second one. And Newcastle largely outplayed Arsenal at the Emirates in the first half. However, they are losers. Arsenal secured their Champions League spot thanks to a wonderful strike by Declan Rice in the 55th minute, while Newcastle still have a little bit to worry about their Champions League berth. With the Liga title already decided, it was all about the final European spots and of course relegation on the second to last round in La Liga. Let's start with the Champions League places, where Villarreal can secure that one because both of the results went their way. Atletico Madrid beat Betis at home 4-1. A Betis team is very much looking forward already to the Conference League final. And Julian Alvarez scoring an absolute peach of a free kick in the 10th minute. Lenormand, Julian Alvarez a second one, and Correa adding the other goals. At the same time, Villarreal were a little bit party poopers at Barcelona, winning 3-2, a perfect 3-2 win as well. Jose Perez opening and scoring, Lamine Yamal and Fermin Lopez turning around before the halftime, but in the second half, Comesana and Buchanan get the job done for Villarreal, who celebrated then on the pitch that they have Champions League secured. good, but Barcelona also celebrated as the trophy was presented. So all winners on the pitch. In the race for the Europa League and Conference League spots, Celta suffered a real setback. With a win, they would have secured the Europa League more or less already. However, they lose at home to Rayo 2-1 despite taking the lead through a Marcos Alonso penalty. However, Palazón and De Frutos turn it around just before they have. Celta cannot find an equalizer and are now in a precarious situation where they could potentially even miss out on Europe. Mallorca, meanwhile, surely will miss out on Europe as they lose 2-1 at home to Getafe. The chances were anyway slim. And curious enough, Osasuna is also still in the running for at least a Conference League spot, with Ante Budimir and Raul Garcia scoring the 2 goals in a 2-0 win over Espanyol. A win that leaves Espanyol in a very precarious situation, as an early Raba goal gave Leganés a 1-0 win at Las Palmas, meaning they're only 2 points behind Espanyol, so there is a hope for safety. And both of these teams have now in the final match the home games against already relegated opponents. So not much to play for either of these, but it's all open to play as well. And lastly, Alaves secures survival with a 1-0 away win at already relegated Valladolid. Let's run also through a bunch of games that did not have much riding on them. In the last home game of the season, Real Sociedad get a 3-2 home win over Girona. Marias Corena scoring in the 91st minute to get that win in Imanol's last home game at Real Sociedad. Sevilla against Real Madrid was not a nice game to watch. 2 red cards already for Sevilla through Balde in the 12th and Romero in the 46th minute, and it took them until the 75th minute that Mbappé breaks down Sevilla, and he is within 1 goal of getting the golden shoe. Jude Bellingham adds a second one in the 87th minute. Berenguer also gets Athletic Club a 1-0 win at Valencia, but they were already secured of their Champions League spot. So this ends one of the last trips through Europe that we're taking this season. There will be for sure one next week, and there will also be a midweek review as the Premier League round wraps up. We also have some playoff games in there, so we get one in before we go to the Cup final weekend next weekend. There's also some playoff rounds and some final rounds, of course, in Spain and in England as well. So quite exciting. Please let me know in the comments which of these final matches did you enjoy the most. Also drop a line, where do you think that things in England will pan out. Give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. Subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos like these. And I will talk to you soon about more things in my soccer universe. Bye! Hey there! I really hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, here are some videos and playlists that you may enjoy too. Also, please consider subscribing to my channel and hit the little bell icon so you get notified whenever something happens in my soccer universe. And with that, have a wonderful day. Bye!